Iowa is going to have to do everything to stop Audi Crooks.
You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Locked On Women's Basketball. If you're anything like me, you woke up to another gray day with snow outside. I live in the Midwest, so I just want to say I see you, and I know you're fighting the good fight. Sophia's all the way in California, living her best life. It's fine. I'm going to move past it. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Okay, the roadmap for today. Is the NCAA headed towards a CBA? Maybe trying to take a little bit after the WNBA. Maybe they can figure out those negotiations soon too. A'ja Wilson doing A'ja Wilson things, showing she is that girl once again. But the in-state battle between Iowa State and Iowa happens today. It's going to be number 11 Iowa going up against number 10 Iowa State, back-to-back in the rankings, back-to-back in the state. Both teams are entering undefeated, and I wasn't positive about how much of a rivalry Iowa and ISU have really had. I just always kind of figure when you're going up against an in-state opponent, you kind of want to see who's the more dominant in-state team. But the ISU coach, Bill Fennelly, said, in a state that doesn't have major league sports, Iowa State and Iowa take up most of the oxygen. And this is the kind of game in which the energy and enthusiasm gets elevated. The rivalry has taken a little bit of a slant towards Iowa recently because they have won 8 of the last 9 meetings. But today's game looks like it could be a little bit more of a toss-up. Iowa coach Jan Jensen said, "I still don't know how good we are yet. This will give us a good marker." That's what both teams need. Iowa coming in with some strength, obviously, but I think this Iowa State team is going to look a little bit different to them than they have in previous years. Obviously, Audi Crooks being in her junior year, but also Jada Williams has been a really significant asset to the Cyclones.
Definitely. And when Audi Crooks was on ESPN earlier, she talked about her teammates so highly and basically said that I'm not able to do what I can inside and be so efficient, be so dominant in the interior without my teammates just setting me up, being shooters on the outside so they can't really help in on me too much. Because this word has been thrown around on the last couple of our podcasts, she also mentioned it's basically like a flow state that she gets into. She said that, not me. She said verbatim, flow state, when she gets into that rhythm and she's just scoring, dominating, owning paint. I mean, we've seen it, a couple 40-point performances, extremely efficient. She's one of the nation's leaders in field goal percentage. So she's just scoring at such a high rate. But like you mentioned, Jada Williams has really stepped up in her playmaking, not just as a scorer, but as a facilitator, averaging 6.8 assists per game. So that number has gone way up, and it's really her and Audi Crooks owning that inside-out game.
For Iowa, they've dealt with a couple of injuries on their side too. Their point guard, Chit Chat Wright, should be ready to go according to Coach Jensen. And then also added that Emily Rodriguez is definitely day-to-day. I'm not positive exactly what that looks like for her today. She may or may not be playing, but obviously depth against any team, especially an Iowa State team, is going to be helpful in its own right. But we have Ava Hayden for Iowa as well, who is another significant post presence. So very excited to see that post-to-post action between her and Audi Crooks. She's averaging 16 points per game and 9 rebounds a game. And then obviously you have Hannah Stuelke, who is one of my favorite players, obviously another front court presence, averaging 12 points a game, 8 rebounds a game. And she has a little bit more seniority and has gone up against an Iowa State team before and has also played at Iowa State. So I'm sure they will rely heavily a little bit on their senior leadership to get them through this one too.
Between those two players in the front court, I wouldn't be surprised if it takes turns switching on and off Audi Crooks just to try to disrupt that flow state and rhythm that she gets into when she's just mic and drilling it. But again, because those are both physical presences, they can rebound at a high rate. So like I said, I think I would not be surprised if they switched off on Audi Crooks. And it's going to have to be a matter of one person does the boxing out, one person goes after the boards. So I'm really interested to see how these front courts will match up against each other, and specifically those centers, because Hayden is almost averaging a double-double. She is 0.1 away from averaging a double-double at 16 points per game and 9.1 rebounds per game. So that's going to be just a really physical battle down there.
Exactly. You mentioned it's going to be a physical battle, also a very offensive battle. I think these are two teams that rate pretty highly offensively. For Iowa State in particular, they are scoring per game on 94.8 points, which is one of the top offenses nationally. They have really great ball movement. We talked a little bit about that inside out balance between Crooks and Brown, as well as the shooters. An assist volume coming from Jada Williams, who loves to share the ball, averaging 6.8 assists per game. Again, is very beneficial when I think I was seeing something Andrea Carter had said about what it looks like for these NCAA women's teams right now when they're kind of playing at their best. And she mentioned the significance of getting those paint touches. Jada Williams is going to make sure that she is feeding her bigs. And then if they need to kick it out, they kick it out. But when you have an Audi Crooks inside, when you have an Addie Brown inside, especially Audi Crooks, who has such a soft touch around the rim, she knows exactly where to place it. It's very difficult for her to miss a shot, considering she's averaging 27 points per game. That's going to be a big focus, obviously the inside out between Iowa State. Iowa has a very balanced attack, so they don't necessarily rely on a single player. There's always multiple contributors across all positions. So I think their kind of mix of strength, both inside and outside, is going to give them some flexibility, but also going to be very comparable to Iowa State, who can also have a very balanced attack if they've reached their flow state, like you mentioned.
Yeah, and this game for these two teams is, aside from it being a rivalry, it will be probably their biggest test at this point in the season. Iowa did beat Baylor early on this year in late mid-November, so that was a really solid win from them, but otherwise they didn't face any ranked opponents. They had a solid win over Miami and a blowout win over Rutgers, but again, Iowa State's going to be a different battle. And for Iowa State, they had that game against Indiana that Audi Crooks scored 47. So she's already proved that she can do it up against tough competition, but they have not faced a ranked opponent thus yet. So it'll be a very intriguing matchup because, like I said, this rivalry, one, and just the fact that they're 10 and 11 in the standings right now, it's going to be extremely competitive.
Absolutely. Really excited for that game. But coming up after this, Asia Wilson is probably going to have to build a whole new closet in order to have all of her awards in one place. You know, there's no reason to let big wireless drain your wallet, especially during the holidays. Right now, Mint Mobile is running their best deal of the year. All of their unlimited plans are 50% off. That means you lock in 3, 6, or even 12 months of unlimited premium wireless for just $15 a month. It's the easiest way to take your overpriced phone bill and give it the full Scrooge treatment. And what makes this even better is how simple Mint makes the switch. No contracts, no nonsense, just real savings and real quality service. Switching to Mint lets you keep your same coverage for a lower price. Setup takes only a few minutes. You can bring your own phone and number without any issues. Turn your expensive wireless present into a huge wireless savings future by switching to Mint. Shop Mint unlimited plans at mintmobile.com/lockedonnba. That's mintmobile.com/lockedonnba. Limited time offer. Upfront payment of $45 for 3 months. $90 for 6 months, or $180 for 12-month plan required, 15-month equivalent. Taxes and fees, initial plan term only. More than 35 gigabytes may slow when network is busy. Capable device required. Availability, speed, and coverage varies. See mintmobile.com. A'ja Wilson has had a year, and I mean, she has said it herself. She talks about it all the time, just how blessed she is to be in the position that she is at. And, we've talked about her, obviously, especially after winning her third WNBA championship in the past 4 seasons, just the impact that she has had on basketball and just her impact as a human. Obviously in the sports world, but just in culture as well. But she has won the AP Female Athlete of the Year, which was released yesterday. This is the first time in her career. She said, just to have my name. Let me start over. She said, quote, "It's an honor when you think about the group of women who have won before you. Just to have my name be part of it, I'm blessed." Wilson is only the 5th player to be honored as the Female Athlete of the Year since it was first presented back in 1931. So she joins names like Cheryl Swoops, Rebecca Lobo, Candace Parker, and Caitlin Clark, who won it last year. She received a heavy amount of votes. A group of 47 journalists from the AP and its members would vote on this. Wilson received 17 votes, and Paige Beckers was actually in there as well. She was 3rd with 5 votes. I know Paige will probably win one eventually, but A'ja Wilson was just having a year, and this is kind of just the cherry on top when you look at it.
AP Female Athlete of the Year times Athlete period of the Year. Those are some incredible accomplishments, and like you mentioned, it really is a award for the combination of her on-court and off-court achievements. When you look at on court, she's the first player in WNBA and NBA history to win the MVP, Defensive Player of the Year, Finals MVP, and scoring title all in one season. So you're looking that and the history in itself and just the impact that she's been able to have off the court, release her signature shoe earlier in the spring, the Nike A1s that sold out on Nike.com in 3 minutes and were sold out in stores worldwide. So again, talking about a global impact, even when you're looking at the deeper aspect of the figure that is A'ja Wilson, her shoe commercial is an ode to her roots and Black Southern culture. A'ja Wilson's on top. She can't be stop. That one. I'm sure we all heard plenty of times during the WNBA season. And just for her, again, her shoe was the first that Nike had released for a Black women's basketball player in more than 2 decades. And she said, quote, "When I have these seats at the table, I'm clearing space for people to bring their chairs up to." So she's really just doing it on all different fronts. And that's what I really think she got the time and the AP Female Athlete of the Year, because I don't think there were many other female athletes that, one, had such a dominant on-court presence or on the fields, wherever they're participating, and off-court cultural impact.
just to run through A'ja Wilson's accolades once again, obviously she has the AP Female Athlete of the Year. She is also the Times Athlete of the Year, which we mentioned. But just running through what she did this year: WNBA MVP, WNBA Champion, WNBA Co-Defensive Player of the Year, 5th Women's Basketball Player to win an AP award. 23 points and 10 rebounds a game is what she was averaging, as well as at least 2 blocks per game too. So again, just kind of stating she is really that girl. But she had a quote from Times about winning this award in which she says, quote, "And this year I collected everything. I don't really talk much ish. I mean, crap. I kind of let my game do it. This was my biggest moment of doing it because no one's ever done what I've done. And I think people really needed to understand that," end quote. Let's remember that at the beginning of the season, when the Aces weren't performing at their best, everybody kind of came down on A'ja Wilson, saying that she wasn't playing the way she did in years prior, that she just didn't look as good this season. And mind you, she was just warming up because that team then went on like a 14-game win streak or whatever that number was after their losing streak. Once they had that like 40-point blowout and post All-Stars, it was all Aces for the league after that. Obviously, she was the main one kind of running that race. But the fact that, she mentions she doesn't really say much about herself, and she really doesn't. She's going to let you know that she is very good at basketball, and she is one of the most talented athletes that we have ever seen in the history of women's basketball. But she is not somebody that isn't going to be humble about it. And I think I really love that she said that and mentioned it, because when you reach a certain level, everybody's going to find a way to try and tear you down no matter what. And I love how she remains herself no matter what, but she's also going to remain humble about it. But at the end of the day, be like, hey, just letting you know, nobody's done this before, and nobody has. So it's not like she's lying or in the wrong. She's 100% right. And even to what you said with her cultural roots, I love that she incorporates being a Black female athlete in everything she does, being from South Carolina, being raised in the South, obviously playing at South Carolina, on top of it, playing for a Black female head coach, but also just some of the other parts of, she's also an AKA. Like, she's just a player that is so ahead of her time in what she's doing, but she's always been somebody that you feel like you can relate to, because she's made that part of her so clear that she wants to connect to the people that are also, rooting for her and uplifting her.
Exactly. And I think that's a huge reflection and reason why we've seen such a growth in the WNBA, even looking at the last two. For Times Athlete of the Year, last year it was Caitlin Clark, and same thing with the AP Female Athlete of the Year being Caitlin Clark. These women's basketball players, because of the exposure that they've earned, they've been able to share more of themselves, and people are loving that relatability. And A'ja talked a little bit about the growth of the league, especially this is such an important time with the CBA negotiations and how they're trying to continue that upward trajectory with the WNBA. And she said, quote, "I only know Kathy by when she hands me trophies," end quote. So she said that just about the relations between the players and the commissioner. But she also mentioned that we're in a league where they're like, quote, "Oh, happy you got private planes." No, that was just scratching their surface. And so I think that A'ja, like you mentioned, she's not one to just maybe do a exit interview like Napheesa Collier, and I don't think that's a different story, because Napheesa Collier truly outdid herself there. But A'ja will stand on business when it needs to be done. And like I said, I think her winning this award is just such an important time. And again, a great reflection of the growth of the WNBA and why these players need to continue to get the platform and the money that they deserve, because it's making such an important impact.
Absolutely. She also mentioned that she thinks she can win 3 more championships. And trust me, she is really just getting started in her career. I believe she's like 29, 30 years old. So we are going to be getting plenty more of Asia Wilson in the future, which truly excites me. But coming up after this, we're going to talk about college 80s considering getting collective bargaining.
The World Cup is coming back to North America for the first time since 1994. And with 48 teams for the first time ever, it's going to be massive. But let's be honest, getting tickets is usually the hardest part. That's why the Game Time app is clutch, finally giving fans a real advantage when it comes to snagging seats. With Game Time, you can track your price drops in real time, get alerts when great seats open, and buy tickets the moment they hit the app. It puts the power back in your hands and makes going to the World Cup realistic instead of impossible. You pull up the app and the layout makes it so simple to scroll through the matchups and compare seat views. The seat view feature is a game changer. You literally see what the pitch looks like from your exact seat before you buy. Take the guesswork out of buying World Cup tickets and every match, concert, or event with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, download the app, make an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go, Game Time.
Brief intermission to just talk about something, which isn't that serious at all, but I like have been playing. I don't know. I really like Jersey Club remixes. And they have a version of Justin Bieber and it just keeps replaying. It's like back again. And I think that every time, like, I just keep thinking that every time we're coming back from an ad read, I'm like, back again. And it's like Justin Bieber's voice playing in my head. For those that don't know me, I used to be the biggest believer on this planet. My room in 5th grade, like you couldn't see the walls in my room because they were all just covered in Justin Bieber posters. I had a Justin Bieber themed birthday. Like I truly had convinced myself that me and Justin Bieber were going to fall in love. Was that very far from the truth? Obviously, but who was to tell me in 5th grade that? Anywho.
Exactly. I think my childhood bedroom, I definitely had a full fat head life-size picture or sticker of Dwayne Wade, and I also had One Direction pictures. So you had Justin Bieber, I had One Direction.
Listen, I also had One Direction, but that was my wave afterwards. That 5 seconds of summer, that was my era during that time. Times have changed, but still love them. But we'll get into this collective bargaining. So obviously everybody, to an extent, understands the landscape of NIL. However, that has caused some issues at individual schools, kind of like how much money you can really allocate to each school and each player, which maybe is getting slightly out of hand in order to control it to some degree. Am I explaining this very well? Probably not, but this article really kind of confused me. So I'm doing my best to relay that information back to you. But essentially, more athletic directors are now seriously considering collective bargaining with athletes, considering the scape of NIL that they're in. And they are trying to discuss this with the House in order to basically reinforce spending caps and recruiting rules at each school. Coaches openly negotiate large payrolls despite supposed spending caps, highlighting the current lack of sort of the regulation that there is with how much money can each player really be getting. Some of this, it can be a little bit confusing where some schools can kind of spend up to as much money as they want to players. Other schools don't necessarily have that same space to do that. If we're thinking even like the schools that I went to, Syracuse is probably going to have a lot more money to give in NIL deals or to get a player to come to the university compared to when I was at DePaul University, which is obviously a smaller institution, not as big when it comes to athletics, at least not within the recent years. So it's kind of trying to put more control on that. And by doing so, they are trying to collective bargain with it.
Yeah, I think you did a great job explaining.
Okay.
But to take it even further, what all of this essentially is leaning towards is the professionalism and privatization of college athletics. So one of the implications of that potential collective bargaining could have is that athletes would need employee status, which that puts the amateurism into a little bit of jeopardy when you're looking at some of these athletes, because as soon as someone signs an agent or enters that professional space, they're considered professional, and then that's when it can get muddled with eligibility for some of these professional leagues. So it's a very interesting time in the landscape of the NCAA. And this is just, again, all sports. And recently, like you mentioned, some of these schools have just been able to recruit these players and pay them out of the athletic department's budget, or some schools have a separate private group that they call an NIL collective that sometimes will pay some of these athletes. And again, that's where the issue of maybe a salary cap and collective bargaining agreement, and a collective bargaining agreement similar to what we've discussed in the WNBA would just help to ensure the rights that some of these athletes have. It's just, again, when you're looking at some of the 18-year-olds who are entering into the college space, to immediately kind of be considered a professional in that aspect, it does seem a little quick. However, with the way that the NCAA is trending, it does seem important to have these athletes protected. Again, I mean, I think NIL was a huge boost, and athletes should 100% get their NIL. However, it's just a matter, these kids they're young, and it's going to be a lot of money. And I think that's just why some of these players, coaches, fans, even administrators want clear and consistent enforced rules. I even know, for me personally, I feel like the NCAA has flip-flopped on so much stuff recently. I can't even follow along with what is permitted anymore. I think you look at it, not even 10 years ago, where everything was so strict, you couldn't see a player pull up in a new car without raising a lot of red flags.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point. Obviously, like, you want to protect the athletes as much as possible. And I think that's why it's so important for universities to give players access to financial advisors. Even my dad's a financial advisor. He was a professional athlete, and he works specifically with everyone, but he really hones in on working with athletes, because that is a lot of money to be thrown at you at a young age and just expect to understand what to do with it. I think on top of it all, the NCAA now owes players a significant amount of money from those that appealed with the NIL prior. I think I forget exactly where the cutoff is, but essentially players that played before that didn't have access to NIL within a certain year that they were in school are still going to be able to get money for essentially what they would have made while being an athlete there. So that also makes you want to apply even more regulations on it, because you want to make sure the current players are getting the money that they deserve, but also the players that could have really benefited from this are also getting part in what they deserve. So a lot of money and numbers being thrown around, but seems to not necessarily be a bad idea. They also talked about some revenue sharing, which again, all of this is kind of a branch off of what we talked about with the CBA negotiations with the WNBA. Those meetings are supposed to happen this week for the NCAA. So we will give you an update on what we hear from that. But for now, thank you so much for tuning in to Locked On Women's Basketball. Excited to see that Iowa State and Iowa game today. We will be